We are here with Steve Heimiller to answer the hot seat questions. All right, Steve, are you ready for this?
I was born ready for something. Maybe this. I don't know.
Tammy, if you could jump into a pool of something, what would it be besides water, of course?
Orbeez.
Orbeez.
Little beads that inflate in water, so then it's just like you just lay in them like a hot tub kind of full of beads.
Jenna, welcome to the hot seat. If you could jump into a pool of something, what would it be besides water, of course?
Chocolate milk.
Because anyone who says like a ball pit, they have never had like a sickness after jumping into a ball pit at McDonald's. So it's nasty kids.
This is the wrong time to jump in a ball pit.
Yeah. Nope.
If your life was a movie, what would it be called?
The girl who can't ever decide.
I mean, the title would have to be something like Hallmark, but like engineering related, about like St. Patrick's Day and not Christmas, because everything's about Christmas. But I would be the jaded like engineer that's like, oh, like my heart was broken and so now love doesn't exist, but St. Patrick's Day. Or it'd be something like it's like 10 things I hate about you, but it's more like 15 things I like about you as my friend. It's not depressing, like it has a good ending.
Oh yeah.
It's just like, you know, this ruggedly good-looking guy, ruggedly okay-looking guy, you know, achieves a lot, but then it's a Christian movie and Kirk Cameron's in it too. So,
what is your favorite joke?
I like to tell the stupidest pirate joke. They've probably all heard it from me, but what's a pirate's favorite letter?
What?
Everybody says R, but you say, no, it's the C, don't you know?
Jeez. What is your favorite joke?
Why do rappers need umbrellas? Oh, drizzle.
Oh. Good find. For a wild card question at you. Okay, is there a leader that you can do a particularly good impression of?
Yes, Cora.
Okay. Oh yeah? All right, give us your best Cora impression.
Okay, guys, we're here to be real and raw, okay?
Oh,
That's
that was good. It was good. And this is a Fuse hot seat classic. Do you fold or crumple your toilet paper?
well, I always say I'm a gentleman, so I fold it, and I fold it at least twice, because I'm not an animal. Like, we're all quarantined, but that doesn't mean we like devolve into our state of nature. We still fold and wipe.
Your most embarrassing moment?
I think I've told a few of the kids this. When I was in either 6th or 7th grade, I was on the track team and I was doing a high jump. And I was running and I ran. The track was a little bit wet and I ran and did my little angle move before you would jump over the bar. And I slipped and I slid underneath the mat you would land on.
Oh.
Rather than go over the bar, I went underneath the mat. So I got negative measurements.
Your most embarrassing moment?
There's a couple. I think one I thought of, so I was at McDonald's with my family. I saw my brother in front of me, and so I was like, I'm gonna mess with him. So I grabbed his shoulders and gave him a good shake. And then he turned around and it wasn't my brother, so that was fun.
Oh no.
I was like, oh, and since I was a shy, like, cute little kid, I was like traumatized and was like, oh no, it's not the person I thought it was.
And then you hit in the ball pit, right?
Yeah, and then I went in the ball pit and was sick for the next month with like, some kind of staph infection or something.
Oh.
So yeah, don't go in a ball pit, guys. It's fun for like, it's like one of those proverbs about like temporary joy and happiness, but long-term consequences. Like sin, but this isn't morally wrong, but it's pretty close. So.
Pretty close, yeah. Your Most embarrassing moments.
Oh goodness, I forgot about this one. um, in middle school, I was doing a talent show, and they had you walk onto the stage like while the audience was looking, and I fell and broke my guitar.
Oh.
Yeah, and so I sang the song still, but it was so out of tune. It was really bad.
No. How would you rather die? Would you rather be eaten by 100 piranhas or by one hungry shark?
Probably one hungry shark.
Really? Why is that?
I think the piranhas would be lots of little nibbles before they got to a vital organ, so there'd be a lot more pain. Shark probably would like cut me pretty fast and I'd bleed out. So
There you
less
go.
pain.
I like it. Go for the quick kill. Would you rather spontaneously combust or have a grand piano fall from the sky and land on you as you walk down the street?
Grand piano falling in. Because I like music. So it's like music is taking me out. It's fine.
That's fitting. Awesome.
If you have been on this earth for more than a day, you have probably realized that sometimes this life hurts. We get bent, we get broken in ways that we just were not expecting. I wanted to take a second and encourage you guys with something in a way that it might be a little strange. It's with this deck of cards. Okay, so here's what we'll do. I'll shuffle this up real quick, just a second. And then Christian, I'm gonna have you just tell me to stop whenever you'd like. Stop. Okay, right there. All right, let's take a look at this. What this card is. We got the three of spades. Chad, would you actually mind coming in and helping me? This card is going to represent mankind, so will you do me a favor? Just write "man" on the face of that card for me, real big so the camera can see. Perfect, perfect. Thank you. All right, so like I said, this card is going to represent man. All right, here we go. And sometimes, like I said, life can feel like we are broken. Just bent and broken in ways that we weren't expecting, and we can feel shattered in our lives. But the best part about this is that we have a Savior. He's the King of Kings, and He is love. And if we, in all of our brokenness, came on Christ and leaned on Him, He has an amazing ability to make us whole. Not only does He make us whole, but He actually took all of that brokenness, all of that shatteredness on Himself in order to make us whole and complete.
So before Cora and I took a sabbatical back in November, we had a year plus where we experienced a lot of pain, a lot of hurt, and a lot of suffering. We had close family members that experienced the loss that comes from a miscarriage. We saw family relationships fracture and break. We had a good friend of ours choose sin over being obedient to Jesus. And then on top of that, we put down our dog, Lady, who was a good, trusted companion. We're still working through a lot of the pain and a lot of this hurt. And as we've navigated through this, our hearts have often asked God, Lord, couldn't you make life easier? If you're sovereign, why are you allowing these things to happen? Lord, why is it that the people who love you seem to go through hard challenges and things like this? I can tell you that Cora and I have spent a lot of time and grown a lot lately in our theology of suffering. And you can't truly develop a theology of suffering until you actually experience it and walk through it. I feel like often in our Western culture, we fall into this trap of believing that happiness and comfort is the ultimate goal. And when life is easy and good, that means God loves you. But if you experience suffering, that means God is far from you and He may not love you like He loves others. And this is how we understand suffering, and this is how we understand God's character in that, then we're not going to handle suffering well when it really hits us. But I would argue that that kind of theology of suffering is not really a proper theology of suffering. In fact, we all suffer, we all experience it in some ways, and God offers us a way to view it through the lens of grace. And since we're all at this time, we're developing a little bit of a theology of suffering as we walk through this trial, not just for ourselves, but our country and the whole world, where we're working out our theology of suffering. And so what I want to do is I want to spend the next couple of weeks talking about this and helping you wrestle well as we go through this together. To see God not as a punisher of good people, but rather to see God as a comforter. Because I think what happens when we go through trials of suffering, that can draw a wedge between you and the Lord. And that can cause us to doubt God's character and say things like, maybe God is not all that good. What I want to do is set the stage. I want to talk about our God and what does it look like to view suffering through the lens of grace and through the Bible. And so tonight we're going to talk about why is there suffering and why does God allow it. Often in the church we use phrases like, well, God is in control, which in some ways can be really comforting, right? But then also in a lot of ways can be extremely infuriating, because if God is in control, why do bad things happen, especially if you are a good person? We tend to look at life in a moralistic system, meaning pain and suffering come as a result of people not living rightly. People get what they deserve, right? That's kind of our system. But it gets confusing when all of a sudden we think we do good, but then something bad happens to us anyway. For followers of God, we then go, well, what the heck, Lord? Like, what are you doing? I deserve better. I deserve more. What I have learned in my theology of suffering is that I tend to look at life in ways in which I am owed something, or I rationalize it in a fair, unfair system. When bad things happen, it's easy to blame God. He is the natural scapegoat when life seems unfair. But here is the thing. And this is really huge to understanding a theology of suffering. Life is not unfair because of God. Life is unfair because of us. So I want to give 3 points here to start us off and to start our wrestling into a theology of suffering. Point number 1, it wasn't God's plan for there to be pain and suffering. So we look at the Bible, we think back to the beginning of Genesis, and I think there's a lot of text there that can all get summed up in Genesis chapter 1, verse 31, where it says, God saw all that He had made, and it was very good indeed. When God put the universe together, He did a pretty darn good job of it, at least from what we understand in the Scriptures. Not only did He create the planet that we inhabit with everything in it, all of its beauty, the universe with all of its stars, all that we see to give us life, but God also created peace, shalom, that existed in the universe.
Imagine a world where there is no conflict, no sickness, death, or pain. None of that existed in the beginning. That wasn't even a thought. In fact, I think we can look at today, and I would argue that God is grieved when he sees suffering today, when he sees the pain, when he sees the hurt of what is going on, because that was not by his design. Life was fair through the lens of God. Second point, life is unfair because the world that we live in is broken. We talk about this all the time in Fuse, in the subject of the fall. So what we mean by that, Genesis 3, when the serpent deceives the first humans, Adam and Eve, to disobey God, the consequences of disobeying God were not just, well, God is angry about sin, but the consequences of disobedience is the breaking of the plan and the peace that God created. So because sin entered relationships between mankind and God, that created a wedge, that created a break, and then all of life and how it was supposed to be sustained by being connected to God is now broken, meaning now we have death, meaning now that we have sickness, meaning now that we have pain and suffering. And this is not just for us as people, but also the whole world as well. In fact, when we go all the way to the book of Romans in chapter 8, the Apostle Paul talks about this fall moment when he writes, "For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of those who subjected it." Meaning, he's hearkening back to Genesis 3, saying that everything broke in Genesis 3 because of sin. And this world continues to break because of sin, and the depths of it disrupt everything from relationships to one another, to God, and even to how the world naturally responds to it. Everyone is in pain because of the events in Genesis chapter 3. Now, there's still beauty in this world, right? And we can still appreciate and we can still enjoy a lot of the things that we have around us. And we can see humans do amazing things like build up systems, like build up ways to keep order, to keep a sense of peace, and to make people feel happy and comfortable. And so I think we get used to that because it's like, well, humans know what they're doing. They've created their own world, right? Things seem to be going well. But when those things get disrupted, when those systems break down, or when something gets stolen from us, our sense of peace and our sense of comfort, it's a reminder of the world that we live in. Though it is beautiful, it is still broken. You know, it's amazing to think back to just a few weeks ago and what happened in Molson Coors and that event. And it's just that reminder that, you know, we can be living life and trying to live it for the fullest. But then we get reminders over and over of the brokenness of the world because of sin. COVID-19 and I think other diseases and other sicknesses, that's a result of a broken world. Now this does beg the question, why does God allow this? And honestly, what I've learned in my wrestling is that this isn't God's fault. This is the consequences of sin, and this is the ripple effects that it has upon everyone and everything. So it's wrong to say that God is the cause of this virus. It's honestly because we as a mankind, we wanted to live our own way all the way from the beginning, from Genesis 3, and then all the way to now. There are examples after examples after examples of how mankind has tried to be their own God, and then with that, there come the fruits, whether it be good fruit or whether it be bad fruit. And so we're faced with the reality, especially today, that we're not very good at being God. Even though we try to do a better job than Him, we're really bad at it, and we can't stop the bleeding. And I want to recognize that if we're mad, if we're sad, if we're feeling a variety of different things as to what is going on and how you've been impacted, I want to encourage you, it's okay to feel those emotions. It's okay to feel mad and sad and heartbroken as to how the world is. And in fact, I'm heartbroken by the brokenness that we see. The Bible encourages us, even in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, it says that there is a time to weep, right? One of the shortest verses in the Bible, but a very powerful. Even Jesus wept at the sight of his friend Lazarus in the grave. We are allowed to feel these real and raw emotions. But here's our third point. God makes a way for us to express our pain and our hurt to Him. As I've grown up in the church, I've experienced the time of pain and suffering, I've had well-meaning people say things like, you just need to get over it, or there are worse things happening in the world besides such and such being canceled, or, in the grand scheme of eternity, like God's going to use this, and school, sports, prom, graduation, those things don't mean a whole lot. And, at the same time, there's a lot of truth to those statements. Unfortunately, they lack sometimes sympathy, and they can come across as insensitive. And those statements make us also believe that God doesn't care about us when we feel the sting of loss or when we feel pain. So I want to say this, and listen to me on this. God is big enough to be our comforter in any kind of pain and any kind of loss. And I want you not to see God as the cause of your pain, but as the one who comforts us in the midst of our pain. The scriptures say so much about the character of God being this loving Father and being the kind of Father who wants to sit down next to you, who wants you who wants to comfort you, who wants to allow you to cry and to mourn. This is the character of our God. Not a God that says, just get over it, it'll be fine, but a God that sits with us and says, I love you. I'm here for you, even in this pain and suffering. Psalm 34:18 says that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and save those who are crushed in spirit. Last August, we put our dog Lady down, and I got to tell you, that was some pretty intense pain. And I get it, not everyone's a dog lover, not everyone understands the kind of bond, and people will say it's just an animal. That's fine. I don't judge those people, but for Cora and I, that kind of relationship with an animal is pretty special. And it was her time to go, and we knew it was coming, but it did not change the fact that it was a pretty sad moment, and there was some pain that came along with it. You guys know me. I'm not much of a crier. I typically don't do that, but for the week leading into it and the week after, and even some moments after that, there were lots of times where I was crying and just bawling my eyes out and just weeping because of this pain, because of this loss. And that's sad, but there is also something peaceful about that time of mourning. I didn't feel like I was alone in my grieving. God provided me with my wife, Cora, and we wept together. God gave us an amazing amount of friends, near and far. Some of our youth leaders and some of our small group friends and people within the church just kept loving on us and caring for us and praying for us. And then even in all of that, even in that pain and what we were experiencing, the peace of God met us, even in our sadness. And that had a way to really make me appreciate the fact that our God, even in the midst of our trials, of our suffering, of our pain, did not leave us, that there was no request that was too small or too big for our God. He was there with us. And one of the things I've learned in my theology of suffering, it's not that we want to experience suffering, not that we want that to happen, but if we never experience loss, we never get to experience the character trait of God, who is a comforter, a healer, and a provider. This is what I hope you see in this season. If you're hurting or heartbroken because of what is going on, I want to encourage you not to look at God as the cause of your pain, but rather to see Him as a comforter. And there's going to be more that we talk about this subject, and we want to spend some time talking about how God even redeems cases of suffering, and we want to try to distinguish the difference between suffering caused by our own hands, but even how God uses that, versus suffering if we feel like we're doing good. The Bible has a lot to say on those things. But in this time, I want to just sit right here and just talk about this idea of God being a comforter in the midst of your pain. And I hope that as you're wrestling through all of this, I would encourage you to take your heart to the Lord. And as we go into breakout groups, I would encourage you to share. Like, this is the place to do that. And just that reminder for you and for all of us, myself included, it's a good thing to be real and raw with God. Our God is the kind of God that loves to listen to us and loves to hear from His children.